I've worked for companies where they had literally alerts built to where it's like, if we don't get a sale in 5 minutes, something's broken.
If you're not the person that's in direct contact with the client, your client is the person that you are talking to.
And to get 30 people in the room, it took me 4,000 emails and messages, right? So that was 3,970 no's to get 30 yeses. What's going on, everyone? We are back with another The Programming Podcast episode with Danny Thompson, Leon Noel. I'm Danny Thompson.
I'm Leon Noel.
We hit it on the first try.
Let's go.
Run, finally.
First try. We're working on a beautiful intro for you folks, though. It's gonna be exquisite. So bear with us through you're here, the OG crew, right? You're here from the beginning. We're gonna add up the production quality, and it's coming. So thank you for being here and being through the shakes.
Oh yeah, I saw it when like our first episode. My whole background is not there, right? So it's like they've seen the progression of things starting to get added and improved already. So hopefully by now, if you're especially watching this on the video side, you're kind of seeing all the effort that we're trying to put into and the levels that we're going to with this. I guess maybe let me touch in with you, Leon. Like, what have you been doing lately?
Yeah, I mean, for us right now, we just came off of Hunttober. So every October with 100 Devs, which is our wonderful Learning to Code community. We're also a full service digital agency where folks can come to learn how to code, but also work on real projects. And so every October every day we're live. Every day we're live, and we're helping folks get ready for the job search or the job hunt. And so we went through all of how do you prepare for behaviorals, technicals, all the techniques, CAR, EU prep, like all these things that we use to just like stand out during interviews. We did data structures, algorithms. We looked at our resumes, LinkedIn, sent everybody to your course for LinkedIn. Like it's just a good time to bring community together. We had anywhere from like 500 to 800 people live every single day working through these things together. People getting jobs every single day. Like, it was pretty wild. Our Celebrations channel has lots of new jobs of folks that are kind of walking into it. So for us, we just wrapped up yesterday. Today's my first day not having to go live, which is great. Perfect timing for the podcast. And then we're gearing up for a fun month of working on projects together, and then maybe cohort 3 coming in the pipeline for 100 Devs. I know you're getting close to conference time, so how you doing?
Honestly, I've told you before, I'll tell you again, I'm fighting for minutes every day. Like, I'm not even fighting for hours anymore. It's like, can I get 10 minutes here? Can I get 5 there? Like, that's where I'm at this point. But it's good. Like, I'm humbled by all the support that's come out for it. Really, yeah. I am. Like, some of the speakers that have donated their time to come out to this thing, I think it's incredible. Like, yeah. For me, at the end of the day, I just want to help folks. And the fact that other people feel like the same and they want to do the same and they're actually going out of their way to do that, I think it's fantastic. I've been talking to like a couple colleges. I'm like, hey, we want to make sure that if you have students that want to come be a part of this thing, we don't want to break the bank. So if they can't afford to come, we'll cover their ticket, we'll cover the meals, all that good stuff. We don't want them to have a diminished experience. But on the other side of things is like, I can't just make this a fun for beginner conference, which would be great, but there's no real value for companies at that point. So it's like I'm reaching out specifically to key decision makers of businesses, CEOs, CTOs, VPs, etc. Like, if you look at the speaker list, we have some big name speakers, but we've also been very strategic to make sure we're getting companies there. So that way, if I can get one person hired, that's a win. But if I can get more than one person hired, that's what it's all about. And it's not even just your first job. It's like, what about your second? What about your third? So on and so forth. So we're trying to get the people in the room to kind of, make something happen. Whereas like Hamilton says, the room where it happened. Like, if I can make that happen, that'd be great. And so trying to definitely go above and beyond on what we can. So I'm excited for it. At the very least, it's the first year. I don't know if we're going to do it again. But if we do, we've definitely set the bar high for myself as far as the quality of speakers.
Yeah, the speakers on that lineup are redonkulous. I was like, who would I want to like go talk to? Every single person I'm like in tech that I'm like, yeah, I probably want to go talk to them. They're at the conference. It's wild. It's like a list of like all the homies, like everyone that I think is like a phenomenal speaker, dope person that I would like want to actually hang out with is going. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I basically said, what do I have to lose by reaching out? If they say no, it's like, okay, they're just not on the speaker lineup, right? So, yep. And I kind of learned something. I think we've talked about this on the podcast already, but it's I've been doing a meetup for CEOs and CTOs, and to get 30 people in the room, it took me 4,000 emails and messages, right? So that was 3,970 no's to get 30 yeses. And so I've kind of just realized that. And at first it was kind of like, oh man, another no. But now I'm at the point where it's like, man, I'm just chasing the next yes. Where am I going to get it from? Who's going to give it to me? And so I kind of took the same thing with the speakers. We definitely had some great speakers apply, but a lot of it was just me DMing folks and messaging and emailing. And some definitely were like, hey, I can't foot the bill. I can't fly out there. Because obviously we're a conference for charity, right? Like we don't have a budget. But then others are like, yeah, my company will pay for this. And, oh, we've got travel credits for this and la-da-da. Boom, done. Like they're here. And so I'm kind of excited about that. But anyway, we kind of talked about doing a different style of episode today and more on the technical side of things. And this was a subject that I brought up because I was having a discussion with people. And, I was at a tech conference. A matter of fact, I'll say I was at All Things Open.
Yeah.
And when I was at All Things Open, it was a great tech conference in North Carolina, but I was in a group of people, developers of all levels, and we started talking about a tool for feature flagging. And about half the people in the conversation were like, what's a feature flag? And so I was like, so this is something that I don't think a lot of people understand how to utilize, especially when we start talking about not just like a hobby project, but enterprise level organizations utilizing it. Yeah. And so I figured that could be like a great subject overall today, and how maybe we've utilized in the past, or why people even utilize feature flagging. What are some of the best practices for it? Some of the ways that you've utilized in the past and things like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a cool topic. It's something that I wish I started integrating like earlier, and something that really kind of changes how I approach pretty much all my code these days. And yeah, you're right. When I talk about them, very few people I think are actually using them for something that I think is like fundamentally like changed the way that I like write code. So I think we should dive into it and maybe kind of talk about like what the heck is a feature flag for folks that haven't used them, and then kind of what we're using them for. For me, I think about feature flags as kind of just like a technique, right? It's a way of enabling and disabling things or features in your code without necessarily having to like redeploy. And so when you have a feature flag, it enables you to do some really interesting things. You can hot turn on and off a feature. You can roll it out to a percentage of your user base. And all of these kind of techniques enable you to build in a way that you might not have approached your code in the past, and has been really fun to kind of utilize.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of break it down a little bit further, feature flagging, it's basically you have a variable that you're setting to something. So Boolean value. For this easy argument's sake, we'll say, is Leon Noel's beard incredible enabled? Yeah. If it is a false value, that would mean this feature is not enabled to showcase. So that would mean Leon Noel is clean shaven, right? Luckily, his feature has always been value of true, because I've never seen that. And so with it being true, that beard is there. This is like the weirdest way to explain it. I love it.
And for folks that are not watching the video, I did cover and uncover my beard just for effect here. But no, that's great. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. And so you can think about it as an engineer. What if you want to turn on and off a UI element? If you are building out a larger application and you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users that you don't want to see a feature right away, how do you do it? And how do you not break things? How do you not wind up with these massive PRs? Like, feature flags can change so much about the development process. And so I think maybe having a few examples that we've done recently, maybe could it be helpful for folks to kind of like illustrate like how we're using them and why they could be effective?
To kind of even take a step further, this is often the example that I give. Mm-hmm. Let's say you work at a very large enterprise level organization. Let's say it's like a Fortune 500 company, right? And you have your cart page, your checkout page. And let's say the business is like, this old version doesn't really suit our needs. We need to step this up. Like through our testing, we've seen And to throw in an extra term that will help a lot of people out, especially if you could even be in dev and not even be familiar with this term, but abandoned carts. And essentially in websites where you deal with customers buying something, there's a term that's called an abandoned cart. And essentially the idea is a customer has basically made it to the checkout page. They're ready to check out and they have items in their cart and then they abandon the purchase. And the reason why this is a big deal is because roughly, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I used to know it, but it's like roughly 80 to 90% of customers, if they abandon a cart, roughly 90% will never come back to repeat that purchase, right? So you're essentially losing that customer at that point, right? So maybe the business is like, hey, we've done some testing and we realized we have too many steps in our checkout process. And this is yielding us to lose customers and have an increase in abandoned carts. So we want to roll out a new version of this checkout process. Well, you can't just tear down the entire checkout process and leave customers with no way to check out. So what you're going to do instead is you're going to have a second version that you're building, and it's behind that Boolean value. So as long as that Boolean value is false, especially if you are doing something like continuous deployments, or for example, I think every company I've worked at now has done daily deployments. So you need to deploy that code, but you don't want to show unfinished code to the end user. Maybe you want to push that code up so other team members can pull it down that you're working with, so that way they can have the most updated version of that branch, right? Yeah. So as long as that flag in prod is false, no customer will see it. But locally, you can change that value to true, and you can see all those changes there because of that flag.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is maybe you want to do some A/B testing. Maybe you just rolled out that second version of that checkout page, and you're like, oh, let's find out if this actually works. You don't want to roll this completely out to 100% of all users, because if it's a bomb and it sucks, what ends up happening? You've cost the business millions of dollars, right? So what they end up doing is they roll it out to maybe 20% of the users, 30% of the users, and they're gauging that data. And so if they're actually clicking on it, if it's actually leading to higher conversions, they're like, this is great. Let's do 50. 50 is fantastic as well. Let's do 70. And boom, let's just roll it out to 100% of our customers now. And that's our new checkout process. And that's essentially how you're going to use Feature Flag with an A/B process. Like, there's so many reasons why you'd utilize it. And one extra thing that I'd say here is very rarely in an enterprise level organization do you have like one feature flag. Especially, I can tell you, when I worked at AutoZone, we had thousands. It's like it was all over the place.
There are even people like these days that like try and find them, right? That are like actively on big sites trying to find the feature flags, which are pretty interesting. I love that you brought up kind of like local versus production. I've kind of been on like a weird tear to like get rid of this notion of like staging. I don't want staging environments anymore. I want production. I want to test in production, like burn down staging. And the reason being, for a lot of things that I'm building, production's getting weirder and weirder for me in terms of it's harder and harder for me to replicate locally. I'm on kind of like my AI grind, and it's becoming harder to differentiate between things I can spot not in production and not. And so for me, feature flags are great ways to say, all right, I'm going to make a change. And then with the feature flag, I can roll it out to just me. Right. I can see what's happening. Is it breaking? Is it doing anything weird? What's happening? And then I can do like a canary, right? Where it's like a 1% of users roll out, see what's happening. If it's not doing anything weird, then I can like just literally increase the percentage like you're talking about. And so for me, I'm able to do a lot of development just directly in prod behind a feature flag, see if it does anything bad. If it doesn't, wonderful, roll it out. And like, that's a very simplified version of the process. But for me, it's been phenomenal. Like, one thing I do all the time right now is building a lot of like smaller AI apps. And so I'll have different models. I'll put the models behind feature flags, and I can turn them on and off, go to my cheaper model, go to my more expensive model, see if it's doing the things I want it to do. And so for me, I can do like A/B test. I can do turning off and on different parts of my application. And so for me, it's just like a wonderful tool to kind of build in a way that I probably hadn't before. Yeah.
So I go back and forth on this. There are definitely times where I think staging is an absolute must. And then there are times where it's like, if you don't have the user base to where it's like every 30 seconds you're seeing transactions, I think you're okay not having it.
Yeah.
But like when you work at Fortune 500, like there's no way you're going to avoid a staging environment, because for all of them, especially talking about online, I can tell you I've worked for companies where they had literally alerts built to where it's like, if we don't get a sale in 5 minutes, something's broken. It's like 5 minutes, but they're like, if within 5 minutes at any time in the 24-hour day we don't have a sale going on, something is definitely wrong with the website. And I'm always like, wow, that's crazy to think about. But for those scenarios, it's like, you have to have a staging environment. You can't afford 30 seconds of a bad situation.
I don't know if that's becoming true anymore with the feature flags that are coming out. Like, well, with the ability that you can use feature flags, because staging is never going to be production. And so you can do all the testing in the world. You can do, even like the testing that you're doing is only like around the things that you think might happen, not what's going to actually happen. And actually having like that full-blown production environment where you can actually see the things that happen in response to your code, I think it's really hard to keep a staging environment like that. I know there are like really big companies that are like doing like really massive clones of like their database with all that like wonderful like data, like, but to actually be able to have things that you're building be tested in production, I think it's really hard to have those staging environments that do it well. And then you still have to push it to production and see if things live up to what you thought might actually happen. And so for me, feature flags actually remove a lot of that worry, right? You can kind of, if you still want to have a staging environment, wonderful, have a staging environment. You have your code behind the feature flag. You turn it on for developers first. See if anything's happening. Do the canary, do it for 1% of users. See if you're still getting the sales with that percentage of users, and then slowly kind of scale it up. And there's like this idea, right, of separating the idea of like your code going live, like this idea being that you can have your code go live for a small percentage base of your customers, for your developers, see if things are actually living up to what you expect with the real data, with everything that you have, and then slowly roll it out to more groups. I think it's like a wonderful value, especially when you have lots of moving pieces, a lot of things that are hard to test. I think it could be really fun. And so I've been just kind of doing that now. And I've seen a lot of like bigger teams talk about this concept recently too, where they're kind of moving to this pattern of staging becoming less and less useful. And hey, we can do all the testing we need directly in prod because we can just turn off that flag and we're good. And it never affected most of our user base anyway.
I can only go off of two specific experiences. One company I worked at, we didn't have a staging environment, and I had the most hellacious on-call weeks of my life there.
Yeah.
And then the last company I was at had multiple staging environments, so not even just one. And I never, ever got a single call after 5 p.m. And so y'all can venture out there if you want to. But I've been on the bad side of on-call and the good side of it, and I ain't giving up that good side. Benefit, just the risk is still so high, I just can't see it. Especially when we're talking about like visual breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of the feature flag, right? Like if we have it behind a feature flag, what's breaking for your users?
So then are you going to feature flag every single release that you do and then go back and clean up that code every single time?
Yes.
That's crazy.
I don't think so. I think that's a beautiful way to develop. Right? Like let's say you're building out a big feature, right? And you're building out this big feature. The normal process is that you have like this massive PR that you then have to like merge. You need staging because something's gonna break, right? But what if the whole time you're developing that feature, you're just getting that incremental piece done, putting it behind a flag, pushing it, right? And then each piece of that feature that you're building out is behind the flags. So it's never going out to your whole user base. You can turn them on for just developers. You can turn them on for a percentage, see if it's working, not working. And over time, you build up to the full like PR that you want to merge into wherever you want your code to go live, whether it be staging, prod, whatever you're doing, right? And that whole time, you didn't have to like worry. If it did something bad, you just turn it off.
But at what point does QA get involved in order to quality assure everything?
I mean, that's depending on how you wanna run it, because you can have the flags turned on for QA, right? Like you can add like just in your however you're managing your feature flags. I'm using Posthog these days, but you can add a whole email list. You can add your company list. You can add your QA list, and only those folks get access to it. They can see it all kind of live to make the changes, edits, things that you need to do, get the feedback you need to get. And over time, it's all behind the feature flag. When you're ready to turn it on for everyone, you can then turn it on for everyone. Like that to me is
isn't the whole purpose of QA to do like regression testing and things like that
Yeah.
in an environment where that would mean for the average regression test, especially on like a larger application, it's hours, right? So for them to have maybe something that's potentially broken in prod, it would take hours before they're finally done and catching it. That risk is so high.
I mean, also probably like, what are you changing to, right? And so I think if you're talking about like UI changes, right? I don't know. Like it's not gonna do anything.
Yeah, small stuff I could kind of see it, but when we start getting like, I'm just remembering I had worked for a company where we had rebuilt their entire loyalty reward system, which was like a very, very big success of our project. It was like a big win. And I remember there was just so much intricacy with every single thing and so many different use cases or edge cases. And so I remember even any single time we would submit a PR for that, the amount of testing QA had to do from like a signed in user versus a non-signed in guest user.
Yeah.
And like the guest user can't be getting loyalty rewards. So they need to be seeing a different version of that rewards thing to entice them to sign up. It was a whole big mess. So I can't imagine launching that in prod without having them thoroughly test, because even then the testing took forever on that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's an interesting argument. It's something to really think about. I mean, at least to think about like, I guess the overall strategy on like how you're going about this and what are you deeming as a major priority for company resources versus like, hey, this is a visual test. Obviously, the only way we're going to test this is visually within the environment. Let's go ahead and just push this up, and if it's bad, we'll flip the flag back off. So I'm guessing you're using some kind of feature flag manager to kind of flip them on and off with a quick response.
Yeah, you can even have like it's like circuiting, right? Like if there's something weird's happening in your database, it can turn them off automatically. There's like lots of things you can do that can kind of flip them on and off pretty quickly. But most of the changes are only going to me. Like if I'm building a project, the change is going to be local to me first, and I'm going to be using it, dog fooding it for a while. If I'm working with a team, it'll be dog food with the team for a while. And then only once it's like working does it actually ever make it to a canary release, which it'll be like 1% of our users. And then we'll see the real data, we'll see the interactions, and then we can have some sort of like release schedule where it goes from the canary to some percentage of users.
This man is testing in prod, y'all. He's crazy, man. He's crazy.
I could just
No, it's interesting. It definitely makes me think.
I'm just like imagining the comments.
Oh God. I mean, to be honest though, like some people that I really respect, like Theo, you know, we all know Theo. We love Theo. I've known Theo for several years now, and he has a very similar take. Not just with pushing directly, he's against like unit testings to a certain degree. And now I know there have been arguments where it seems like he's changed his approach on some of this, but for the vast majority, as at least what I currently know of his current stance, he's against unit testing, where I'm in the ballpark of I'm a massive fan of unit testing. And so for me, I think any time that you're spending developing good unit tests, especially when we're talking about larger teams and applications, for me, a unit test isn't just even the unit test itself, but it's like, how am I protecting my code from the next dev that's coming in to ensure like his change didn't break my stuff? And then I got a new bug ticket that pops up on the Jira board that I'm having to grab because he made a change.
Yeah.
Or for example, the last org I was at, we had several teams working on the exact same, not just repo, but same pages. So it's like, what change are they making that now ends up on my board because we're known as like the checkout team, the e-commerce team, and their team known as something completely different. But because their change, which is on the exact same page, broke my cart button, now I have to go fix all their code plus mine. No, that unit test is there to protect me from having to go back in and deal with all that regression stuff.
Yeah, I think this might be startup brain. Like for me, like I think we have kind of different experiences, right? Like this idea of like large enterprise applications versus a startup, which is my bread and butter has been in startups. That's where I've been most of my career. And so for me, like I wonder what their steel man for the no unit testing thing is. I definitely unit test, but I guess I can see kind of like the kind of what I was talking about earlier when it comes to like why I like just kind of doing stuff in prod is I don't know what I don't know, right? And I guess is that kind of what they say around unit testing, like you just like only testing what you do know. I'm not sure.
So I think Theo, not to put words in his mouth, but from what I recall from his argument, it's that whenever that time does come where the user breaks it through an edge case, because obviously they're not breaking it through what you would deem as normal use. So if it's an edge case that you didn't think about, now you can just fix that edge case. And since it's an edge case and not a majority case, that's not really a big issue in the grand scheme of things. And so you're wasting more developer resources developing that test for it as opposed to just fixing it when the edge case finally pops up.
Sounds like feature flags could really help here. And you don't need unit test anymore. Just throw it behind a feature flag. If it breaks, you fix it. Who cares?
Yeah. See, for me, like my entire career, I've always worked for larger organizations, Fortune 500, et cetera. And so for me, I'm always thinking from that grand scheme of things. And I still like to maintain that. Even if I'm on a smaller team, I like those better standards, especially for the devs that I'm working with. Because number one, it's only going to make their life easier. But number two, it's going to protect my life a little bit too, right? So for me with the unit test, I really like thinking about the edge cases. It lets me think a lot. But if you make a subtle change somewhere else and it now starts breaking the edge case, but because you had that unit test already there, you just saved yourself a whole bunch of stress for when that time finally comes, right? So for me, it's like I don't want to keep chasing needles in a haystack because someone broke something, especially if I can create a test for that. And the thing is, we've all worked in applications where we finally made a change and then somewhere down the road, a year later, it breaks something else. You're like, I didn't even realize I broke it. Or the other thing is, what if you make a change in the application and because it's an edge case, maybe a year goes by and you finally run into it, right? You could have avoided that whole thing just by having that unit test there anyway and been done with it a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever it may be. So for me, that's kind of the reason why I'm a big fan of unit testing. Plus, I'll be honest, I also look at unit testing as a form of documentation. So one of the first things that I do when I join an organization is read their unit test. Like I'll go through all of it. And so for me, it's taught me not just on, especially because if you look at a unit test, if you're doing it right, you're not just testing the basics of what it would do, but all the interactions. So like, if I read that unit test, I'm like, I understand that this user form here, it's taking all the information and where is it sending to now? Oh, I can see like we're mocking this, but our expectation is that we're sending it through middleware to this database here. And we're going ahead and we're creating an API response with this to send to this other service that we're utilizing. That's what it teaches me. And so that sometimes you can't really just get off of just reading the code because some of that stuff that's interacting with, because it's not mocked in the code, you don't realize what those responses are going to be.
What are you using for feature flags these days and like how are you kind of managing them?
It depends on the project. Like, to be honest, most projects, especially if it's like on the smaller scale, we're really not using much of anything. It's just like an A/B testing tool that you can switch around, right? So Monetate is like a great example of that, or Launch Darkly. One new tool that I've come across, and I guess I'll shout them out since they bought me a thing of ice cream at All Things Open. It's DevCycle. And I'll admit the team is pretty cool. I met even the CEO, he was pretty cool. And so they're a cool tool. They're a feature flag manager. They, at least right now, they've kind of said like, oh, any feature flag or customer that comes to them, they'll be like 50% cheaper than anybody else or what they're currently paying or something like that, which was pretty interesting. But hey, DevCycle, if you want to sponsor.
Come on through. Screw all the rest. No.
But they're pretty interesting. And so even for them, they're not just a feature flag tool, but also an A/B testing tool, among other things, which most of them are, to be fair. But yeah, they originally started as an A/B testing tool, and then they switched priorities to being like a feature flag tool as well. So it's pretty cool to see how they've grown. And I mean, they had a pretty incredible presence at All Things Open. So kudos to them. But yeah, I mean, it's something like that, you know. But if you're on a smaller scale, you don't need to. I can't see a reason why paying for that feature flag manager if you can get away with not doing it. You could just do something basic.
Yeah, I remember like years ago, and I want to shout them out because they just came back recently. I don't know if you ever watched Fun Function. Like they're pretty cool. They're big on YouTube. They just do a lot of really good tutorials. Like 7, 8 years ago, I don't know. They did an episode on feature flags. And that was like my first time kind of like seeing about it and like understanding it. And they used Launch Darkly, so I used them for a little while.
Oh,
And then now I've been using PostHog, and what I like, I mean, fully open source, which is dope. You get like a million requests on the free tier. Like the free tier is super generous for anyone that's trying to like build an app or just kind of like play around with these things. Highly recommend it. It's been pretty cool playing around with it. Vercel just kind of like integrated it too. Like they just added it. You can even like toggle and stuff like that from the toolbar. I haven't played around with that yet. I've just seen some people kind of online kind of suggesting it, and hopefully I'll play with that soon. But I guess kind of as like a value for making it this far into the podcast, I put together a small app that uses PostHog for feature flags in the way that we've been talking about them during the episode. So if you want a code base that has feature flags that you can play around with and understand how they work, not work, we'll throw up the link on chat. It's going to be unlisted. The only way you get it is by listening to the podcast. We'll have the editor put in the URL, say it, and then we'll plug it in and we'll put it on the screen for folks that are watching visually. But I think that'd be a cool way to see kind of in action the things we're talking about, how you can kind of develop with it. It'll be a simple Node app, but I'll have that live for you before this episode goes live.
yeah, and not as cool, but I have a tutorial on GitHub of feature flagging that I've given a talk where I built out a checkout page utilizing it.
Nice.
And honestly, I kind of wanted an excuse to use ShadCN because I was kind of new to it. And so really happy with the way that it came out. I even used it for a meetup talk that really went well. But I try to comment or document things within it so that way it's easy to follow if you're new to the concepts. So if you want to see that, it's also on my GitHub. I'll throw it in the show description or whatever, so that way you have a reference point. It's not a massive application on purpose, so that way you can kind of follow it easily. But I even built an admin dashboard so you can toggle the feature flags in real time, so you can see whether it's on, off, and what happens. So on the page, you'll see the admin dashboard, and you can start toggling. Like if you want to start taking crypto payments, that feature is hidden. But if you toggle it through the admin dashboard, it now pops up. Or loyalty rewards, that feature is hidden. But if you toggle it on, then that whole UI and logic starts coming to life as well.
That's cool. Let's see. We got some questions coming in here. I got reached out to help. Oh, there. Okay. This is a great question. Kind of talking. We both did a lot of freelancing throughout our careers. Question is, I got reached out to help someone with a freelance project where we would split the payout 50-50. Anything I should be on the lookout for?
Your check? I mean,
Yeah.
like that's the biggest thing. I'm always nervous on 50-50 stuff with people, especially if you don't know them on a personal level, because everyone is honest until money enters the conversation. And then intentions are really judged. So there's definitely some great human beings out there that will honor their side and some that are just very malicious. And so it's like you need to really be aware of that. Make sure you know everything. I would personally put it all in writing. I don't really honor conversations unless I know that person. So like someone like Leon, I love Leon. And so I think with him, we could easily have a conversation where we're like, hey, we're going to do this project together 50-50. I trust him to the moon. We're good.
Yeah.
But if it's like Joe down the street, I'm like, I don't know Joe. So from that situation, I would be judging it from that. But the biggest thing is, and people judge me for this all the time, I'm a very big proponent of as much money as possible up front. I can tell you right now, I know several people very recently that have done work for actually pretty significantly large organizations, and 3 of them got burned at the exact same time. And they didn't know that they were all working on similar projects for this organization, and they burned them all. And I'm like, hey, I would have taken as much money up front. They're like, well, these organizations won't give you the money up front. I'm like, yeah, but they won't burn me either because I got my money up front. So it's like, how much do you sacrifice at that point? Now, I know early on you just got one project, you're excited about it. So sometimes what I would say is you may want to chalk up some of it to where it's like, if the risk is they burn me, do I got something of value to show for my time?
Yeah.
You have to get something tangible out of it. So it's like, do I got the value to talk about it? Do I have the value to show it on my resume? Do I have the value of the connections that I made in the process? That might be worth the change up of the money. But if somebody is like the owner of the project and they're bringing you on, I want it in writing as much as possible.
I think for me, I've I think it very rarely works out from this interaction I've seen through lots and lots of folks. And so the way I typically advise folks to go about it is if you're not the person that's in direct contact with the client, your client is the person that you are talking to, right? So if they are in contact with the client, your contract should just be with them. Hey, here's the payment terms. Here's what you're paying me. I don't care what happens with the client. I'm not in communication with them. I can't get them to pay me. I can't do whatever. So my contract is with you. I want this percentage up front. I want this payment terms, etc. It's in writing, and then the client leaves them. I don't care. I still need to get paid. And so the 50-50 very rarely works out, especially if you have no strings to pull on that client that might walk, be slow to pay, things like that. I don't want to be paying whisper down the lane to get my check. And so I'll build a contract with you directly. If that's not cool with you, then we'll probably walk away and part ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll even tell you this that I've learned recently. So I'm director of technology at a company called This.Labs, which is, they have a lot of things going on, but one big part of it is they're a tech consultancy and we work for like Google, Microsoft, etc. And one thing that I have never known before, but is very common in tech consultings, is they'll like subcontract work. So it's like another tech consultancy that doesn't have the means to do ABC may reach out to us and like, hey, we need devs to work on this project that we don't have, but I know you have the expertise in. So we want to hire you in to do this. So let's say they work for A and B shop. Well, A and B shop isn't paying us. They're not cutting a check out to this dot in that process. They're cutting a check out to XYZ Consulting, and XYZ Consulting is paying us. So because of that, even if A and B shop screws over XYZ Consulting for whatever reason, we still did work for XYZ Consulting, so they're cutting us a check no matter what. Yep. And what's funny is I recently came across a conversation with a group where I was talking to one of the lead tech leads for the project, and he worked at one consultancy and it was subcontracted 3 times to the top. So each time, each level, they were like, yeah, we don't have the expertise for this. Let's get another one. And it went 3 groups down to the 4th group to get them in there. So it's definitely common in consultancies to do something like that, but they're basically following the exact strategy Leon just said. They're not hoping or have things contingent upon the bigger party getting the big deal. It's like, if you get screwed or not, that's fine. You're on the hook with me instead of that company. All right, y'all. This was a great episode. I think this is a good one. We'll probably keep this in the rotation. I know we're even toying with the idea of starting to bring on some guests. Maybe,
let's do it.
So we may work that into it. If you have any suggestions or ideas for somebody that would be interesting to bring on, let's try and make that happen. Outside of that, y'all, I had a blast. And we will see you on the next one, everybody.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.